welcome. I'm Bruce Fehn, and here we are with another conversation on Teachers Fight Back, our podcast. And of course, teachers aren't the only uh, ones who are having to fight for their rights for the freedom of conversation and discussion about issues of great concern, including racial issues. They are also under attack, and they are fighting back as well. And one of those students is Waverly Zhao. She's a senior at Johnston High School in Johnston, Iowa. And we have the pleasure of hearing
Good
from her
morning. I'm glad to
today.
be
Good
here.
morning, Waverly.
Um,
Thanks.
yeah.
Glad to have you here. Please dive right in. We have a lot to hear.
So I
We have a
am a
lot to learn from
student
you. Go
in
ahead.
a suburban school in Des Moines, in the Des Moines area, and I first started my advocacy following the year of 2020, seeing a lot of racial issues rise up with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, with issues with the current president at the time, spreading misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic and how that created an increased hatred towards Asian communities. And so I had been interested in politics for a while. From a very young age, I had been going to political rallies, including like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And then I also helped a with I think it was either a caucus or a primary. I was a volunteer there when I was in fifth grade. So from a young age, I've always just been involved in the political scene, and I realized that in my own community, I wanted to be able to do more. And so I first began my advocacy with joining the Community of Racial Equity Club at my school. At the time, it was only about 5 students, and it was the only student advocacy club that really existed. But because we were so small, we really just kept to conversation about the issues in our school and kind of just like finding common ground with each other and finding a community. But then I took over the club the next year. And so I really wanted to expand more out into the community, take on more of an advocacy role, and kind of stand up for issues. So that year was probably our like biggest year as a club, and we spoke at school board meetings. 2021 was a year where we saw a lot of book bannings across the nation, and that also impacted my school district. And so the two books that were filed for removal were The Hate You Give and The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And both of those books are written by BIPOC authors and share BIPOC stories. And the filing really didn't have any implications that these books were any different than any of the other books that also included obscenities that were not filed for removal. And so we as a group saw that this was an attempt to silence the stories of BIPOC people. And so I got all of the core students together and we spoke at the school board meetings, and we were able to save those books. And that just continued in my community. We also, I organized a march with another organization called March for Our Lives. Um, and it's a
Is that a
community and
community
national
organization?
organization. It was started after the Parkland shooting by students in Florida, and then it has just expanded since then. And so we have a March for Our Lives Iowa state team that I'm also a part of, and then our local Johnston chapter was the one that I organized it with CORE. And so that was a march against the 1776 pledge, which was a conservative pledge signed by our newly elected school board members that essentially they made the promise to bring education back to what they believe were traditional values, like believing in Christianity and making sure that American history is talked about in a positive light. Um,
Yes. I have the 7076 pledge that came out of President
yes.
Trump's efforts to reorient education, quoting from the 76 pledge, which the board candidates that you're talking about took. was to, well, for one, restore honest patriotic education that cultivates in children a profound love of our country. And so you and others found that particular pledge
Yes,
and the
because
candidates taking it problematic,
in
right?
reality, Trump's his pledge kind of led us down the avenue of our legislators passing House File 802, which ultimately limited kind of the expanse of what could be talked about in a history classroom. And teachers, especially, have felt silenced or, I guess, limited in how specific they can go when talking about issues regarding slavery, Jim Crow laws, Japanese internment camps. The word systemic is like a word that they have to kind of tiptoe over, um, and that was all just because of Trump's 1776 pledge that he announced and created in one of his executive orders, um, and so that had kind of trickled down into this pledge that my school board members signed, and the students all read this pledge. We analyzed it together as a group, and we saw that really um, there's no room for this in our school district. We're a public school district. We use taxpayer dollars. We should not be pushing one religion over the other. We should not be trying to, you know, essentially whitewash history so that white people who are learning about the things that happen to other minority groups, so that they feel more comfortable with what was happening when really we need to be talking about the truth so it doesn't happen again. So our students organized, community members organized, and that protest really showed the kind of um, unity that my community had against these kind of ideas. And it just continued further. After that protest, the school board members did not denounce the pledge, but they definitely got the idea that they are on thin ice. They're being watched. They really have to be careful with what they say and what they do. And it actually came out later that one of the members was a part of an organization that was promoting the school voucher legislation that has been going through the Iowa legislature in the past in the past session, and also will be brought up again this session, which a school voucher system really is only set up to take public money away from public schools and put it into private schools. And so, our already underfunded public education is just going to lose more money with this legislation. And she was an open supporter of that, but she's serving on a public school board. So she was put on blast for that, and basically just not having the best interest of the school at heart. And we've done a really good job at making sure that they know that they are here to represent students in a public school, and to represent the community at large and not their own political agendas. So, through CORE and through this protest, I was able to branch out even more. I joined the Iowa Student Learning Institute, where I was able to take my advocacy more to Capitol Hill and talk with legislators about education bills. And then also hosting conferences for students to learn about how to be an advocate in their community. We host two conferences annually called Rise and Rally, which are all in the Des Moines area. And students were able to kind of learn from me, learn from other student leaders and youth leaders in the community, and with like a lot of different avenues of advocacy, whether it's like poetry, public speaking, um, organizing, creating their own organizations. It was just a very good way for them to see that there's so many opportunities out there. And from there, I joined the March for Our Lives state team as one of the directors of legislative affairs because I found a passion for the legislative side of things. And that led me to apply to become a page for this legislative session. And I start on Monday. And I'm really excited for that. Um,
Hmm.
yes,
Monday,
yes.
January the 9th, is it?
Um,
Okay. So
and then I
new
also
January.
created
Okay.
my own
January
organization
9th.
through all of this, which it is called Iowa WTF. It's supposed to essentially cater to a lot of young people's natural angst towards the big man and kind of harbor that into a passion for social justice, for civic engagement, to say that if you have problems, like, let's just not complain, let's use this to create real change in your community. So all of these avenues have really been a great way for me as a student leader to get my message across, to inspire other students to also join in. And for a very long time we kind of felt helpless. Like during COVID, everything was up in the air. We didn't really know what we could do. And then also, it was all limited because of lockdown and quarantine and whatnot. And so people were antsy to get out and to participate. And all of these things have been really helpful. So,
And these are wonderful examples, and I'd like to hear more about, especially the WTF organization. Let's loop back to that in a little bit. But I also want to hear in a bit more detail, if you would please, about the whether or to what extent there were sort of chilling effects felt in the school even before House Resolution 802, which, as you mentioned, has prohibited discussion in K through 12 and even in higher education of what are called divisive concepts. And those divisive concepts are often ones associated with race, gender, sexual orientation, and other dimensions of difference. And it seems that you found that there was a chilling effect, right? That was, uh, if I'm if I'm interpreting it correctly, that derived even from what was going on through the school board elections and so on and so forth. What did that feel like to you and other students? And did you feel it in the hallways? I know that you began to discuss it within the framework of CORE, the student organization. I'm just kind of wanting to hear a kind of a ground level sort of discussion of how things were feeling inside the schools. I know that you had some very contentious school board meetings, even and there were protests prior to the elections. How were those things organized? So, could you fill us in a little bit on sort of these resistance activities to the chilling effects of
yeah, I
legislation
would say
and
in the
so on and so forth?
school, in my history classrooms, I took AP World History and AP US History. Um, AP World History the year before House File 802 was passed, and AP World History or AP US History after it was passed. And my AP World History teacher, because we talk about imperialism and colonialism, that's a very big part of that topic. She would go into a lot of detail. We would have a lot of open ended conversations, and she would tell us, hey, like, it's okay to be uncomfortable in these situations because it is uncomfortable to see how human beings were treated and dehumanized in order to gain power and control over them. And so she was very open and would talk a lot about that. Well, then going into the next year after House Bill 802 was um, enacted into law, my AP US history teacher was very, very careful about how she talked about things regarding slavery, down to like the three-fifths laws about counting um, three out of every five slaves as people for, yes,
Yes,
so
slaves is
that
three-fifths of
southern
a
states
person,
could
right?
still get
Mm-hmm.
the power in the government with the population numbers without actually giving black people um, human rights. So she was very careful about that. I already had a lot of background knowledge because of core and because of the kind of research and topics that we would talk about in there. um, but other students were very confused because she wasn't able to go into the full um, depth and like discuss the full impact of such, you know, legislation, such government, such power, etc. Um, and they had a lot of questions. They were confused. They were kind of like, I don't know how, I feel like I'm not being told everything. And so I kind of just say, like, this is because of House Bill 802. Like, I know that you don't think that legislation or government really impacts you as a young person, but it definitely does. This is a prime example in this classroom right now. And so I eventually asked my AP US history teacher how she felt about teaching now because of the environment that had been created since House File 802 and other attacks on teachers and public education. And she said that she's working to get her master's so that she can eventually leave the field um, and go on to other things because she no longer has the same passion as she once did because um, it has been stripped from her because of all of these attacks and the lack of support from the community, from the administration, and that's something that kind of sentiment has continued and been felt with similarly with other teachers in my school. One of the sponsors for CORE has been recorded in class because she's a language arts teacher, and a lot of what we do in there is discussion about books. And we read a book about medical racism and Henrietta Lacks with HeLa cells in there. And so a very big part of that is discussing, kind of her experience, how all of the after effects of this medical racism, the systemic racism, could have prevented her family from going into poverty. Um, and a student was recording her in class because he believed that she was talking about things that were illegal. She did not say systemic racism flat out, but I mean, was it implied? That's up for interpretation. But it was a direct, I guess, sort of like standoff between one ideology and the other, one form of teaching about, the truth, the full story, and then someone who is ignorant and wants to essentially not not face the facts of history. And so nothing ended up coming out of the video. The student who did it, you're allowed to record your teachers in class for like taking notes or whatever with permission, and he did not ask for permission. And so he was handled with. But other students who kind of were falling into the beliefs of kind of conservative ideas and the the ideology that came with the 1776 pledge and whatnot were also kind of sprouting up, and they were being supported by parent organizations. And these parent organizations were trying to get their ideas across into the school, and so that is also what came up with Turning Point USA as a group. Was parents were actually telling students to start this group. It was not the students themselves wanting that, political freedom, being able to exchange ideas on their own. It was parents who were telling them, you need to do this because I believe it. And so, as far as like advocacy and, kind of standing up for BIPOC students and other students who have been marginalized in our school district, Turning Point USA is not something that I would say is welcome in the community. I don't believe that their values as a national organization align with a public school because of how their leaders have, been openly anti-Semitic, openly homophobic, have had connections with neo-Nazi organizations, have, I believe there was one instance where there was some like harassment issues with one of the chapters of Turning Point USA, a part of the national organization. And so those were all things that were brought up in school board meetings for many months when Turning Point USA was trying to come into our school district. And our school board, because we already know kind of how they think, what they believe, our school board was very supportive of this club because they felt like our views if our views were allowed, which were in direct contempt of them, then this turning point group, which essentially promotes white supremacy and everything that has kind of fallen into the extreme right side of the political spectrum, that should also be allowed in a school. Um, so I guess this House File 802 has kind of made everything go up into flames in a sense, just has pushed kind of what is allowed in public places and public education spaces, and has given given space and given a voice to people that are directly trying to silence others and silence um, youth voices, BIPOC voices, LGBTQ plus voices, people that stand up for gender inequalities. Really, just they have kind of been able to infiltrate the spaces that were meant to talk about important issues like those, and it has caused a lot of damage. It's set us back. We have had to tread carefully because of threats of lawsuits and getting our groups disbanded. Um, and so it's definitely increased like this pressure cooker of public education, and a lot of teachers are have plans to leave. Students are graduating early to get out, including myself. um, there are students who are trying to get out of the high school environment more and take classes at DMAC or at Drake so that they can kind of escape the fact that school is slowly becoming politicized when it really shouldn't be. So I hope I answered the question.
Oh, no, you have, and I wanted you to keep going because you were saying everything so well. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that you used the word systemic racism, and House File 802 specifically outlaws, if you will, the use of the concept or the term systemic racism inside of schools. And even though uh, many would argue that systemic racism is a essential feature of American history and also the contemporary United States situation, and you gave some good examples of that, and then how it was embedded in the Constitution of the United States. But a teacher had to be very cautious about using any term such as systemic racism and had to kind of dance around the implications of that sort of racism, which was and enslavement that was baked into the Constitution. Um, you also mentioned Turning Point USA, the national organization founded in 2012 by a far right, uh, uh, I guess you would call him a politician, Charlie Kirk, and that there was a that that organization has sought to organize chapters in colleges, universities, and high schools throughout the nation. And as you mentioned, there was a big controversy in Johnston, at the Johnston uh, school district about having that organization organize a chapter in Johnston High School. Um, the board passed that due to the votes of the three who took the pledge, the 1776 pledge, and were on the school board. The organization, therefore, was given the stamp of approval. But I think in a previous conversation, you had mentioned that organization had
Yes.
dissolved for lack
So
of interest. Is that true?
I attended the very first Turning Point meeting the day after they were approved by the school board, and when I walked into the room, very limited diversity, very just white males who believed, conservative values. And I walked in and I was there to listen and kind of see what they had planned. And something that's very important about the timeline is that they were approved with a little over a month left of school, which gives you a very short time window to get anything done as a student organization, or just in general. So towards the end, they were kind of scrambling to find who they were going to pass the leadership to, because all of the members in the room were seniors. Maybe there were two other underclassmen members, but aside from that, it was this group of seniors that had kind of enjoyed the fact that they were conservative, and like together they would all kind of antagonize other students and teachers and try to push the limit of what they could get away with throughout their time at Johnston. But once they graduated and summer came, and then we got back into the next school year, we attended the first Turning Point meeting. Some members of core went to that meeting, and there were only 4 people in the room, which was the 2 core members that came, one actual member of Turning Point, and the president. And so that showed to us, well, they aren't unable to really capture students and what students want to see and what they're interested in. And it also kind of showed us that students can kind of see through this lie of conservatism and kind of how it's causing issues in public education, and how like groups like Turning Point are really just serving to harm public funded resources. So from the very beginning of the year, Turning Point did not have support, and they have since either taken their meetings outside of the school district, and having like the school sponsored group in the high school, or they have just disbanded. We can't really tell, and frankly, we don't really need to know much more, because they have not been able to accomplish the things that they laid out in their very first meeting, which was to teach students how to turn in their teachers for teaching critical race theory in their classrooms, was to get rid of March for Our Lives, which was one of the groups that I had worked closely with and I'm a part of, because they believe that March for Lives, because it's also a national organization, that they went against one of Turning Point's values, which was the Second Amendment right, because March for Lives is a gun control and gun regulation organization to prevent gun violence in schools and in communities. So they wanted to get rid of the school-sponsored March for Lives, and then they also had, in a shocking turn of events, and I think it was because I was in the room during this first meeting, they had said that they wanted to collaborate with CORE to promote community, and kind of show unity amongst these groups. And I was like, okay, we'll see where this goes. But ultimately, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the support. And so none of these things have been accomplished, and they are no longer meeting, and their student or their staff sponsor does not know anything about the organization and where it's currently standing. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we mentioned or not, CORE stands for Committee for the
the
Organizing
Community
of
of
Racial
Racial
Equality.
Equity.
Is that
So
correct? Committee,
there are a couple of variations. Like there was the
Community of
Congress of
Racial
Racial
Equity. Okay,
Equity,
thank you.
in the U.S. Congress. So we get a lot of
Yeah,
alternative. The important part is racial equity. Yes.
yes, it is. Okay, thank you. Um, and right, so it seems that your challenging of these developments has had its effects and its consequences, and I know they would, and I know they're ongoing, and that's really important. Um, at the same time that you're resisting these developments, you and your fellow students, it seems that you've described an overall chilling effect within the framework of the school, which students, at least some students, are seeking to steer clear from or get away from by going leaving school early, going to taking community college classes where they feel that they have a more wide ranging set of issues and thoughts that can be in circulation and in discussion. Um, that's really interesting and important to hear, just to know about the
Yeah, and
environment
to
of the
kind of
school, the
add,
atmosphere of the
there's
school.
also kind of
You
just like a lack
want to say?
of interest in even participating in school activities anymore, aside from like general sports that students have like played since they were very young, or the few student organizations that will look good on college applications. Um, there's a lack of student interest in a lot of the events that like our student council puts on. We really only have like a handful of students that are outside of our council that come to be at school after hours. It's a lot to ask for students nowadays because they want to spend as little amount of time as possible in the school environment because of um, how chilling, like you said, how kind of suppressive it feels for them. So
Mhm. Okay. Um, and I also want to kind of loop back in a moment to talking a bit about organizing marches as you sought uh, to have political involvement or political mobilizations with respect to the Johnston school board elections. But at this moment, we're talking about chilling. I know that there's been recently, I think it was recently, was it not, that Representative Jake Chapman, who's a Republican representative, actually from a district about 90 miles away from Johnston, he isn't even in Johnston, came and visited or came to a school board meeting. Was that
That
recently, or was
was
that more?
last year. That was during our
Was that about a year
round
ago?
of book bannings. He came to kind of, and this is something that he also said as Senate president in a video at the start of the legislative session last year. He kind of said that because of what teachers are pushing, referring to the books that were being banned, he said that the obscenities that were said, which were racial slurs and some curse words, and like some sexual things that kind of pertain to the truth of the narrative that was being told. He said that those obscenities were illegal and that he would um, pass legislation that would get teachers arrested and would get librarians arrested that supported giving these books to students. And something that Jake Chapman and a lot of people who were fighting on that side of things was trying to use to kind of gain the attention of people outside of the community that really had no um, reason to really, I don't know, just to capture their attention. He was saying that these books were being given to young children, that him and his five children that are not in high school or in middle school would not be reading these books. And it's important to know that the books that were trying to be banned were at a high school age level. Was something that was reiterated by the teachers that came to speak about how they were used in the curriculum. But side, these right leaning conservative people were just saying that they were indoctrinating young kids in public education. They were spreading lies and false information so that people would see the story. And obviously, when you have things going on in a school that's not age appropriate, that is something to be worried about. But that was not what was happening at all. And so Jake Chapman contributed to a lot of like the, I would say, hysteria of surrounding book bannings. And he spread a lot of, he said things that really scared teachers. They seemed to fall silent when he came. And he also forced the school board to change some policy on public comment and who is able to actually speak at board meetings because he has no jurisdiction in the Johnston Community School District. And so, why is he speaking on an issue that does not involve his district? So, we ultimately changed, and this is also just to protect the community in general and to make sure that our public comment time is not taken up by people who don't go to the school. We changed our policy so that only students, community members living in the district lines, parents, teachers whoever is in the district can speak on it. And I think they also have very fine lines about which representatives and senators are allowed to speak. Um, they have to have the Johnston Community School District as their constituent in order to be able to speak at meetings from now on because of kind of the things that he was saying, and also because a lot of his words were really just to create, um, was to cause harm to our teachers and our students who were there that day. So,
Yes, I understand. Right, he said some things that were quite, I guess, condescending is a gentle word to towards students
yes,
who were
him and
defending their
other
books.
parents
Right.
kind of said, because
Hmm.
students came to talk about these issues on our own. We were not told to come by anybody. We organized ourselves. They were saying that us being there was causing a ruckus and we were a circus, and this was crazy that we were allowed to be there. Um, and really, that just came from a place that they knew that they weren't prepared for young people to actually stand up for their education. I think there's a belief by some older generations that young people don't care about politics or our education. We don't care about the things that are being decided by adults. But if it my kind of belief is, if it affects me, I should care about it, and even if it doesn't affect me, I'm still going to care about it. I was in this advocacy work way before I could even vote, but that still didn't stop me from telling other people to vote, to get involved, because it's so important. Youth voice is so important because we're the future. That sounds very cheesy, but we are the future. We are, we're going to be dealing with these issues for a lot longer, and we really need to kind of know what we're facing early on instead of getting dismissed by adults saying that we don't know what we're talking about.
Right, and you talked. You've mentioned the word organizing. You and other students have organized to challenge book bannings. You've organized to challenge a school board that might that seeks to, and some members seek to sort of chill conversations that can take place in schools over about issues that are really significant for the future of the for the present and future of the United States. Um, so when you organize, do you have a core of students who are willing to uh, who you can call upon, or others besides yourself, other leaders can call upon, who say, yes, we need to be present. We have to have our presence known. We have to have our voices heard. We have to have our ideas in circulation. Um, and does that have a ripple
Yeah,
effect? Does that bring in other students, do you think? Or is it a hardcore group of a central
I
group
would say
that's
that a lot
particularly
of
influential?
the facilitators of CORE, including myself, are big advocates. We are the ones who have been consistently showing up even when it's not a protest, and so calling on to those people that I've worked with closely just in that group. Other student, oh, sorry.
How many? How many? I'm
We
sorry.
have 5 leaders
How
of
many would
CORE
those
now
be?
because
Do
of
you
how
think? Is
big
that
our group has become. Just having that additional support as leaders has been very helpful. But then also calling upon one of the person that I closely worked with for the 1776 March, Isha Bolar. She is also a senior. She has been working a lot with March for Our Lives since like middle school, organizing at a young age. And so she's been also very, we have kind of like found friendship and a bond over our advocacy work. And she's someone I continue to work closely with um, moving forward. I also have our community sponsors of CORE. They're a parent group called JPAIR, which is Johnston Parents for Equity and Anti-Racism. They have been a very big help because they have organizing for the first time is a lot as a student, and when you don't know everything you need, in order to be safe, in order to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Calling on to adults who have had that experience before was a big help. And so they have been supportive of CORE, of our organizing, of other student organizations. And they will always like repost and share information that the students are organizing. And they are also very helpful in that a lot of times in youth activism, it's believed that like youth are not able to organize themselves, and so some groups have also targeted JPAIR and said that they are indoctrinating core students to do all of this to get their political agendas across. And because I am the leader of CORE and I am the one who's doing all of this, it's just like a slap in the face when you're not able to, when it's not believed that you're able to accomplish these things. And so they've been very big on, saying like, this is a JPAIR event, this is a CORE event, this is students, this is not us. And then other people, through my advocacy work, I've met a lot of people from like Ames area, from like around the central Iowa region. And now with the March for Life state team, I've met people in more broad areas of Iowa. And so calling on to them, getting marches and walkouts done across central Iowa was like an agenda that we had with Iowa What the F. We really wanted to kind of show that all schools are united in central Iowa, all major high schools. So we had walkouts in Ames, Valley, Ankeny, Johnston. So a lot of schools getting involved and coming together. And so there's like a large group of young people that I can reach out to and get support from. And even with still within CORE, we have a statewide meeting. That's why I'm at the library today, as soon as we had a statewide meeting before this, where all of our sister chapters come together and work towards, promoting racial equity in all of our communities. And so we're organizing together as like 12 chapters to create a community event in this coming May for students and community members to come and share like conversation, just to enjoy themselves and like to also promote BIPOC artists in the community. So just like all of the work that I have done has led me to other people who have the same ideas and same values and who are as equally as driven and passionate. And I'm able to reach out to them and find support and have them like collaborate with me on work.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Now you've mentioned walkouts. Uh, when was the last walkout,
So the last
what was the
walkout
issue
that I
involved?
organized, I'm trying to remember. It was in the spring um, of last school. So in 2022, I want to say March. And it was a legislative walkout to talk about the issues and the bills that were going through the Iowa legislature that impacted public education. And so that was the goal of the Iowa what the F walkouts was to tell students like, hey, this is what's happening and you need to pay attention because this will impact you. And so the bills that we talked about House Bill 802, which had passed last year, but it felt relevant because we were feeling the effects currently. And then moving into the bills that were currently in the legislature, one of them was about the school vouchers, again, talking about how public funding would be taken away and given to private schools. Another one was about parents' rights, which I understand wanting to be involved in your student's education. I completely understand that as a parent. But there's also kind of like a fine line of allowing students to choose for themselves what they want to see and what they want to read. And this bill would take that away. It would give parents complete control over what their students could read, what they could learn about, what classes they could take. And then another bill was about, it was either having um, live streams going in classrooms at all times so parents could see what their students were learning about, or there were just a lot of bills that year that were proposed talking about um, we're essentially just talking on the mistrust that a lot of conservative people have regarding public education, and also how they're taking steps to further harm the public education by removing funding and essentially causing teachers to leave the profession.
Right. Someone who left the profession was a person I've learned by the name of Lewis Fountain, who I think, is this correct, was the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, um, a position, of course, intended to actually create a better atmosphere within the framework of Johnston High School, I think. Um, and But yet he left the position. The position was created by the school board, and then he left the position.
Yes, so Lewis
Do you know anything
Fountain
about that
has
story?
been connected with CORE for a long time. CORE student was also involved in his interview process for the position, and selected him as someone that they felt would correctly serve Johnson students. And so from the very beginning, he was a big supporter of CORE, and was definitely there for the right reasons, was wanting to promote equity, was trying to get an equity audit done so that we could kind of get that data um, of where Johnston is falling short for marginalized groups. But he was not supported by the administration or by the school board. He's not allowed to really talk about it because of like disclosure agreements and whatnot upon leaving. But I know from conversations that I've had with him and with other community members close to him and close to the work that he was not supported, and really in any way. He was given this whole this like very hefty job of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but was not given really any another person to help him with that. He was going around to all of every single school in the Johnston Community School District on a regular basis, and being taken away from his time in his office. And then when he did finish projects, our superintendent would essentially say, I don't think this is the right I don't think this is the right move for our district. And so rightfully so, he got frustrated and he chose to leave and go to an environment where he knew that DEI was respected and was seen as something that was essential to a school district. So he moved back to DMPS. Um, yes. So
Des Moines Public Schools.
his him leaving was not a surprise to anybody who works in with equity. And he had left the equity audit as kind of like his last project for the school board to decide, and for the superintendent to present to the school board. And so I that equity audit was like one of the very first things on our agenda for this school year, and I am the student representative, one of the student representatives on our school board. So I was there for this presentation and hearing it. And our school board is very against equity audits, um, from a lack of understanding of what an equity audit is,
That would
and also because of their fears of what it will uncover. In the conversations, that one board member was openly saying how he will never support an audit because he believes that it's not the right, if we have the data and we have all of the information, like why do we need to hire a company to essentially put it in a way for us to see where all of the shortcomings. He was just very against what I think what an audit would imply about what our school district is really doing and how harmful our school district is to BIPOC students. So since Mr. Fountain's leaving, there has not been any progress in equity work. Um, and the school board has kind of been able to put roadblocks into any progress. And so, as core students, we have been having to kind of take on more because Mr. Fountain has left. He was our only representation in the administration, and we as students want to see this equity work done. And so, why not try to do it ourselves? So we're currently trying to work on doing like a small audit, nothing really formal, but just sending like a survey out to students in the high school and seeing how they feel about our school environment and presenting it to the board, because really if they are not going to do it themselves, then we as students need to stand up and take action.
And you're going to be graduating soon. Do you think will be a remaining core of students in Johnston High School that will carry on that work in the absence of any support or lack of support, if you will, from the
Yes,
school
there
board
are a
or
handful of
administration?
students at core that will stay there after some of our facilitators and also members will graduate, and they have done a really good job at kind of learning the background of core, all of the things that we have done and faced, even if they were not in the group at that point. And so I'm very I'm at ease with who I'm going to leave core to and leave the work to. And I definitely think that they have the support of the community as well, our community sponsors, other young people that I have been able to connect with from like the middle school and elementary school ages, who have kind of have like an understanding of the importance of equity work. And so I'm very excited to see what they're able to do when I'm gone. And I will definitely try to remain as like just someone that they can come to with questions, because core has been a big part of my work and my life, and I really enjoy it and love what I've done with it. So
Hmm. Do you keep records
we've been
of the
trying
core's
to
activity over time? Do
we
you
are trying to currently get our website updated. We have a website for all of the chapters, and we're trying to save our, our progress and our projects on theirs as sort of like an archive, and also just for other people to go on and see, wow, this group has done a lot. And even across the board in all of the chapters, they have been able to do so much. Um, as far as other like archival work, we have our social medias, which I was more to save our photos and kind of give a broad timeline of what core has done. So
so tell our listeners, if you would please, uh, what how can they get
uh,
to the website?
it's a long URL. It's Core for Advancement on Google Sites, and it's currently under construction. But our social
Okay.
media
So,
is on Instagram, and it's JCSD underscore core. So they'll also be able to access the website through our bio in our link tree, which also has links to all of our news articles that we have been featured in and other relevant things that are going on in the Des Moines area.
well, I'm glad to know about that resource. You're going to have to. So a guy like me who's more uh, simple with technology, if you advise me to do a Google search to find out about Core and its activities, what should I do? Johnston Public Schools,
I mean, I
CORE.
would hope that that would put you in the right area. I think if you also did like Johnston Core Linktree, that's the it's a website for websites. So you put links to other links in that, and so we have a link tree that has all of
Mhm.
our
Okay.
links there. I'm trying to look right now to
Okay.
see. Yeah, it's just Linktree/Johnston Core, and Core is up all caps.
Johnston Core. Okay. Now, that's wonderful because it provides from what you're describing, a wonderful resource for access to all the events and people who might want also to organize and find ways to uh, promote inclusion, diversity, and equity in their schools, and to stop the chill or of discussion of such issues. This sounds like, well, it doesn't sound like, I'm sure it's a really important research source. So, right. So social media has been an important resource for you to stay connected, to publish viewpoints, to record information, to have an archive. And also, there's this parental group that has its own site as well. So that seems very significant. How, in terms of you and other students deploying social media to have your voices heard, to develop organizing tactics, to communicate with one another, to give each other mutual support. Is that a fair
Yeah,
assessment?
social media has been a major player in our like organizing and just connecting with students. And especially when we were doing like virtual and online school, social media served as a way for us to stay connected. And also during that whole time with other advocacy and other issues like social media posts, it was a way to learn information fast and also to share information fast. So it has definitely helped.
Was
Twitter.
Twitter a problem?
I don't use Twitter,
Mhm.
but I would say Twitter
In terms
has
of
been a part of
in the
that
okay,
from what I've heard.
okay,
Um,
just wondering. Well, okay, I've heard that sort of in real time organizing Twitter it can be valuable. So I thought maybe that was the case. But just in terms of getting organized,
yeah,
organizing a protest,
we've been
organizing a
able to
march,
like
all of which you've
post
been involved
our
in,
yes, social
social
media
media
has been essential.
is
We've been able to
central,
post our like
key. Is this
our protest posters, all of the information about what to do, what to wear, where to be at when. Um, Also resources following protests about how to get involved with like applications listed for other organizations, um, like scholarship opportunities, all of these other things to help our community in any way that they might need. So yeah, social media has been a great resource, and it's also a great way for the community to see what CORE is doing when we aren't organizing. Because we still meet, we still try to do work behind the scenes, and a lot of the time it's not the behind the scenes work isn't really given the correct kind of positive. I'm trying to find the words. Yeah, it's not giving the
attention,
attention that
perhaps?
it deserves because it's not so publicly like showy and like in your face. But I think social media does that side of things some justice, and a lot of people are kind of understanding now that it takes more than just organizing one march to create progress.
Right, it takes constant and continual work, and right, I think that you've given some insight into a significant insight into what the behind the scenes work involves, and I'm very interested in the details of that work, and because I think it's really important to understand what takes place, what the hard work entails, and that's why I was asking questions like, well, what happens at meetings? Or maybe I didn't ask that specific question, but that's what I want to understand. I want to understand just the kinds of connections people make and the plans, how they evolve, and the kinds of really the kinds of mutual courage, I guess, or mutual reinforcement of courage demanded in order to just keep this work going and to actually uh, be out front, right? Because it's not easy for a lot of people to actually stand up and be counted, to have their voices heard. So that's all very important. Um, it seems like a lot of the really valuable action that's taking place inside the hallways, inside the classrooms, at school boards, in conversations is between and amongst students. And I think that I'm really happy that we've had this conversation because I think you've really elevated our understanding, certainly my understanding of how this all took place. And I hope we can have another conversation. We've talked for now over an hour. It's been extremely interesting. Um, I wish you very well. You're
Yes.
going to be a page starting Monday in the Iowa legislature, which is Republican dominated.
Yes,
It
and
should be quite the
I'm working in the
experience
House
for you.
Minority Leader office, so it should be even more of an experience dealing with kind of like the Republican majority and kind of the red wave that Iowa has experienced in the past couple of years. Um, so I am very excited. I'm excited to learn more about the legislative process and really hone in on that side of the work that I want to do in the future and like going to school to work in the political space going forward. So yeah, I'm very excited. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Waverly, very much for this conversation. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks.
And you take care, okay?
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.